Hi, I'm Amanda Morgan, and this is Not Just Cute, the podcast, where we discuss all kinds of topics to help bridge the gap that exists between what we know and what we do in early childhood education. We're starting conversations with academics, authors, decision makers, educators, and parents so that together we can improve the quality of early childhood education while at the same time protecting and respecting the childhood experience. In my book, Not Just Cute, How Powerful Play Drives Development in Early Childhood, I simplified the definition of play down to two essential elements: agency and joy. It's a simplified definition, of course. There are many other things that we could talk about when it comes to play, but I find that focusing on these two key elements is highly instructive. Over this and the previous episode, I'm going deeper on both, exploring what they really mean, why they matter so much, and what it looks like to protect them in the early childhood classroom. You can find this episode's show notes, which are always full of links, tidbits, and resources at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 85. Before we jump in, a quick reminder that you can find my book along with study guides and summary videos at notjustcute.com/book. It's grounded in research, but also written to be accessible and practical for the educators and leaders doing this work every day. It's a great resource for book studies and professional development, and I would love for it to find its way into the hands of the people who need it most. Find links and the free study guide at notjustcute.com/book. If you're looking for more support for why joy matters for early learning environments, why it's not just cute, but actually essential to both play and powerful learning and development, then this episode is for you. Let's jump in. In the last episode, we talked about agency, the ability to choose, to self-direct, and to engage in personally meaningful ways. We talked about how it shows up in every major developmental theory, how the research keeps confirming its essential role in learning and well-being, and what happens to children when it's quietly taken away. I also mentioned that agency is something AI researchers are actively trying to build into their systems. And I asked once again, can we please make sure we prioritize agency for real human children before we commit ourselves to prioritizing it for artificial intelligence? Today's topic, joy, takes that idea even further. Because if agency is something AI development is working toward, actual joy is something it will never realize. I did a cursory search to see if there's anything remotely like joy in artificial intelligence. What I found were arguments that rewards can be built into a system to condition certain behaviors. But that's not really joy. That's external behaviorism, manipulating a response with incentives. We actually see humans confuse that relationship with joy too. But genuine joy, that's something entirely different. It's the intrinsic, personal nature of joy that makes it so powerful. It's what lights us up from the inside out. So today, let's talk about what joy actually is, why it matters so profoundly for young children, and what it looks and feels like in the early childhood classroom. Here's the thing about joy. It's one of those words that everyone understands until you ask them to define it. Like play, like love, like beauty. It's real and it's powerful, and yet it resists a tidy, clear definition. I heard a phrase about joy on a podcast episode recently, which I will link in the show notes, and it's been rolling around in my brain ever since. The episode featured an international human rights lawyer, someone whose work involves confronting some of the most devastating violations of human dignity in the world. This is heavy, heavy work. And he said something really powerful. Joy is the oxygen of doing hard things. Joy is the oxygen. I love that. When I first started researching and thinking about joy for this episode, I was thinking of it as a spark, that little ignition point that gets things going. But this phrase turned all of that on its head. The spark, I think, is our humanity. It's in all of us. And joy is the oxygen. Joy is what keeps that spark alive. Without it, the spark of our humanity can be snuffed out. We become hollow. We go through the motions. We become In a word, artificial. So let's join the researchers, artists, and poets and try to define joy. Start by thinking about what it feels like to you. Feel it in your body, and then try to define it. Joy is something like happiness, but somehow greater. It's contentment and safety. It's also exuberant elation and also the quiet calm of being completely absorbed in something meaningful. Joy is an emotion, and it's also a state of being. It's interwoven with hope. It's personal. What brings you joy may be completely different from what brings your neighbor joy or what brought you joy 15 years ago. In an essay on fairy stories, J.R.R. Tolkien wrote about joy, and he coined the term eucatastrophe, that moment when everything suddenly goes right, the unexpected twist, the happy ending that you didn't think you could even hope for. He saw joy in that sudden, surprising turn toward the happy ending. And I think early childhood learning environments are more like fairy tales than we sometimes give them credit for. They're full of magic and surprises and unexpected twists. They're full of that eucatastrophe, the block tower that finally stays up after falling 3 times, the dramatic play scenario that almost fell apart but ended with firefighting mermaids who also happen to have dogs because that's what creative collaboration sometimes produces. It's the aha moment when something finally clicks. Joy in the classroom isn't predicated on everything going perfectly. In fact, some of the most powerful moments of joy come from overcoming, from figuring it out, from the satisfaction of mastery. Joy is found in curiosity and discovery, in creating something that didn't exist before. It's in the warmth of genuine relationship and being truly seen by someone who cares about you. It's connected to play in ways that are deep and reciprocal. Play generates joy, and joy sustains play. Of course, joy sounds wonderful, and it is. But I want to make sure that we don't leave it in the nice to have category or in the realm of fairy tales, because the research is very clear that joy is far more than that. One of my favorite quotes, and I mean this, it might be one of my all time favorites in the field of education. If you've ever heard me speak, there is a high likelihood that I worked it in somewhere. It comes from neuroscientist Dr. Judy Willis, and it says this: neuroimaging research reveals the disturbances in the brain's learning circuits and neurotransmitters that accompany stressful learning environments. Joy and enthusiasm are absolutely essential for learning to happen, literally, scientifically, as a matter of fact and research. I love those qualifiers. Literally, scientifically, as a matter of fact and research. She's not saying joy is nice or helpful or a bonus. She's saying it is essential for learning to happen. That's a strong statement, and the neuroscience backs it up. Here's what's happening in the brain. When children are in a state of joy, genuinely curious and engaged in what they're doing, the brain's chemistry changes in ways that go far beyond simple external rewards. Joy enhances memory, attention, flexibility, motivation, and creativity. It doesn't just make children want to repeat a behavior, it changes how the brain actually functions. It opens the brain up for the kind of deep, flexible, connected learning that lasts. The reverse is also true. When children are in a chronically stressed, bored, or joyless environment, the brain's learning circuits are disturbed, interrupted. Information can't be processed properly. You've probably felt this yourself. Think of a time when you were so overwhelmed, so stressed, that you couldn't absorb what someone was saying to you, even though you were looking right at them. Nothing was getting through, nothing was processing. Or maybe you've read the same paragraph 4 times and nothing got through. That is stress changing your brain function in real time. And it happens to children too. And when it happens every day in their own learning environments, those consequences compound. Neuroscientist Jaak Panskep, who earned the wonderful nickname the rat tickler for his research involving playful interactions with rats, he found that play activates the entire neocortex. That's the region of the brain responsible for thinking, learning, and remembering. He also found that just 30 minutes of play increased levels of BDNF, or brain derived neurotrophic factor. It's a chemical responsible for brain growth and healthy neural connections. That's why Dr. Stuart Brown, who draws on this research, calls play fertilizer for the brain. And joy is a critical compound in that fertilizer. We don't build joyful learning environments because it's cute. We don't do it because we're soft on rigor or because we want kids to only have fun and we don't care about learning. We do it because joy is literally and scientifically a condition for real learning to happen. When we protect joy in our classrooms, we are making a neurologically sound, research backed decision about how young children's brains develop best. There's another dimension of joy that I don't want to skip over, and that is its relational nature. Joy isn't just an internal state, it's also something we experience with and through other people. The American Academy of Pediatrics, in their landmark 2018 report on the power of play, described something called mutual joy, the shared delight between children and the caring adults in their lives. That mutual joy, they found, actually regulates the body's stress response. When a child and a trusted adult are genuinely delighted and attuned, playing together, laughing together, discovering something together, the brain chemistry of both is changed for the better. Think about what that means for your classroom. The joy you bring to your work matters, not just for you, but for the children. When you are genuinely curious about what a child is building, when you laugh at what's funny, when you express real delight at a discovery, that is not just cute, that is not just warmth, that is neurologically significant. That is co regulation in action. That is you, quite literally, helping a child's brain get into the state where real learning can happen. I was reminded of this by a teacher I met in a training. She had decided to set aside the boxed curriculum and go all in on following the children's genuine interests. As she supported their passions and fueled their joy, she noticed something remarkable. Not just that the children were more engaged and learning more, but that she was happier too. That this joy was changing her. That she was thinking about her work at a higher level, approaching it with more creativity and enthusiasm. When I pointed out in that training that play and joy change children's developing brains, she added that joy and play had changed her brain too. That's what I mean when I say joy is both environmental and internal, relational and personal. It lives in the space between people as much as it lives within them. And when we build environments that protect and cultivate it for children and for the adults who serve them, we are doing something profound. So let me close with this. We are living in a moment that is, in many ways, not especially friendly to joy. There is pressure from every angle. There is pressure on early childhood programs to produce measurable outcomes faster, to push academic content earlier, to treat the early years as a race to the finish line rather than the foundation of a life. In that environment, joy can start to feel like a luxury, like something that we get to after the real work is done. And I really want to push back on that. Joy is not the reward for good learning. Joy is the condition for it. It is not the dessert at the end of the meal. It is the oxygen. Remove it and everything else, the engagement, the curiosity, the motivation, the deep and lasting learning starts to suffocate. The research is not ambiguous on this. Dr. Judy Willis said it plainly, joy and enthusiasm are essential for learning to happen, literally and scientifically. Ponskep showed us what play and joy do to a brain at the chemical level. And the American Academy of Pediatrics told us that mutual joy regulates stress and changes the neurological conditions for development. This isn't a soft argument, it's a scientifically sound one. And yet, I also want to say something that goes beyond the research for a moment, because I think we can sometimes hide behind the science as if joy only matters because of what it can do for neurons or stress hormones. And while all of that is true and important, I think joy matters for a deeper reason too. Children deserve joy, not as a means to an end, not just because it makes them better learners, though it does, but because they are human beings. And joy is part of what it means to be alive and flourishing. A childhood without joy isn't a better prepared childhood, it's a suffocated one. The lawyer I mentioned at the beginning, the one doing some of the hardest kind of work in the hardest parts of the world, said that joy is the oxygen of doing hard things. And I believe that. And I believe that the work of growing up, of learning who you are, what you can do, how the world works, how to be in relationship with other people, this is hard work. Beautiful, wondrous, important work, but hard. The children in our care deserve the oxygen to do it. And so do you. So protect joy, not just because the neuroscience says to, not just because it will show up in your learning outcomes, but because you are tending to a spark of curiosity, of creativity, of humanity. And joy is what keeps it alive. That's why we play. That's why joy matters. And that's why the work you do every single day in your classroom, in your program, in your state, wherever you are, in every moment, when you choose wonder over worksheets and delightful discovery over drills, all of this matters more than you may realize. Keep the oxygen flowing. Keep the joy. Thanks again for listening to Not Just Cute, the podcast. You can find show notes at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 85. There, you'll find links to the resources I cited, as well as other tidbits I know you'll love. You can also hit up the show notes for a link to the book study guide and resources so that you can go deeper in your own study or with your team. And if you missed the episode on agency, pop back to episode 84. You won't want to miss it. I'm Amanda Morgan. You can read more about agency, joy, and play on my blog and sign up for the Not Just Cute newsletter at notjustcute.com. You can also stay tuned for social media updates on Instagram by following me at Amanda_NotJustCute. Thanks for listening today, and as always, thank you for standing up for children and for childhood.